Join me today as we discuss the latest Dragonlance book, Dragons of Fate by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. Welcome back to those who've been here before. Welcome to those who are new to the channel. This is the Geek Cabal channel. I'm Bob, and today we're going to be talking about the latest Dragonlance book, which I picked up, a month and a half ago now, at GenCon, and finished reading it last week before. It's called Dragons of Fate by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, the two primary Dragonlance authors. And I'm going to talk a little bit about non-spoiler stuff, and then I'll get into the spoiler stuff. So, anyway, here we go. Non-spoiler, I can say that I feel like this book was a little bit better written than the last book. And I shouldn't even say it that way because the two of them have written numerous books. It's not like they're bad writers. Maybe it's just more engaging. Hard to say. But I also should point out, we did a review of the other Dragonlance book, which I'll link to in the description. The last book in this new trilogy. There's numerous other Dragonlance books. So I feel like the writing was definitely on point in this one. We were trimmed down to just a handful of characters, primarily like Raistlin, Sturm, Destina, and Tasselhoff, and then some other characters that I'll talk about in the spoilered section. So all that was pretty well written. There's a whole lot of, since time travel is involved, there's a whole lot of, will things change, won't they change, and certain events play out differently than the characters know they should have from history, but things are still kind of going in the right direction. And talk a little bit more about that, spoiler section 2. But no, you also had some introspective moments. This is going to be some spoilers from the first book here, since I'm assuming that you read the first one if you're watching this review of the second one. Raistlin and Sturm are in this bizarre position where they are aware, even though they were taken from the moment that's at the very beginning of the first Dragonlance book, where they're all meeting at the end of the last home, and so they don't know about their respective fates. At that particular moment in time, Sturm does not know that he's going to die at the High Claris's Tower, fighting Kitiara, and Raistlin doesn't know that he's going to die in the Abyss, fighting Takhisis after his bid for ultimate power in the end of the Legends trilogy. However, once they go back in time, it's like their future selves, all their memories and everything catch up to them, because it's something to do with the temporal bits, so they have knowledge of events that have not actually technically happened to them yet. And that causes Raistlin to have some introspective moments, because he knows how he's going to die and what's going to happen, and because of that, he begins to take on if I'm destined to die that way, maybe I can actually do something, good here. And Sturm kind of has to play the role that Caramon plays occasionally, being the muscle, but he's also, still the conscience, because he's a knight of Solamnia. So you get a lot of things like that, and you get some interesting characterization from the other folks that are in the novel. But yeah, overall, I think I feel this is a little bit better book than the first one. Not to say the first one's bad by any stretch of the imagination. I enjoyed it, and I do want to see how this trilogy plays out. So it definitely has that going for it. There's some minor spoilers in here. There's some interesting ideas in this book that could definitely borrow or appropriate for my home D&D campaign if it ever gets back on track. Now, I've only read the only other Dragonlance books I've read are all by Weiss and Hickman or the trilogy that's just by Margaret Weiss. And it's not all of Weiss and Hickman's books, but it's a lot of them. It's the main trilogy, the Legends trilogy, the I think it's Dragons of Summer Flame, which is the one that introduces chaos. Uh, the trilogy after that, where the gods find Kryn again, and Takhisis is defeated at the very end, and the trilogy about Mina, the Dark Cleric, and then finally the other trilogy that takes place like in between the books of the original trilogy. So those are the Dragonlance novels I've read. So there might be things in here that I think are brand new that have existed in 20 other books. So in Dragonlance, there are magic is different. There's a divine component to things because all the magic users have to pledge fealty to one of the gods of magic, who are cousins. And even though one is like, evil, one's good, and one's neutral, they all work together collectively and basically say piss on all that other noise that the other gods fight about. Like, we're all about the magic, not about the fight for supremacy. So a lot of their users are also like that. The evil wizards, use black robes. The ones for good use white, and the neutral use red. However, there are numerous characters, like Raceland's former apprentice Dalamar is a black robe wizard, and he's the master of one of the towers of high sorcery, of which there's only 2 left. There used to be more. And he's actually really good friends with the master of the other remaining tower, even though he's a neutral wizard. Because it's more of a mindset, less of a, oh, I'm evil, I've got to conquer everything, and oh, I'm good, I've got to fight all the injustices. There's subtle differences beyond that. So, and it's nice to see that that plays out a bit in this book. But they mention that each of the towers has what they call a silver book. It's a spell book that could have potentially thousands of spells in it. That each master of the tower is the one that has access to it, and it has all kind of the other secrets of the towers, and only the master can access it. So there's potentially very powerful spells that are not available to a normal spellcaster, as well as the histories on items, like they use it. Dalamar convinces the other wizard, who I believe is Justinian. I'm probably getting that wrong. It's something like that, though. And he, they try to rebuild the device of time journeying because it gets destroyed in the end of the last book. And it's an artifact, and there's a lot of artifacts floating around Dragonlance. But they all come from earlier ages, and so they try to, they've got the parts, but they realize they don't have all the parts because some of them are in the past. And so they have to seek a different method, which I'll talk about here in a minute. So, like I said, overall, good book, definitely worth the read, especially if you're a Dragonlance fan. I should have written down more of the dialogue, but like this is an example of something that like Tasselhoff says at one point, talking about some gnomish machine, and but he notes that it was more of a contraption than a device. As if there's some real difference between the two. But that's the kind of dialogue that you get out of Tasselhoff, who's a Kender. And those of you that don't know about them, you should read up on them. They're interesting. They're kleptomaniacs. But like the typical level of dialogue would be something like someone would say he's under arrest, and he'd be like, "No, I'm not. There's no arrest above me." Or how does one become under arrest? Or what do you It's play on words usually. Some fairly straightforward sentence, and then he just totally takes it in a different direction. That's the kind of thing you come to expect from them, and there's a lot of that in this book. The wordplay is pretty good. So, before I get to the spoilers, uh, just again, like I said, I think it's fairly well written. It's a very quick read. Definitely faster than the last few BattleTech books I've read. And definitely worthwhile if you're a Dragonlance fan. If you're new to Dragonlance, there's definitely some other books you should read first. If nothing else, you should definitely read the original trilogy and the Legends trilogy. And actually, give me just a moment here. I believe there's a bit of a note here in the front, the back. Real quick. Okay, yeah, there's a chart here with references, and let's see what we got here. Yeah, so the Chronicles, that's the original trilogy. The Legends trilogy, the Lost Chronicles, those are the ones I mentioned that are interspersed within the Chronicles trilogy, and then the Second Generation, which is a book after the Summer Dragons of Summer Flame. Dragons of Summer Flame is one that introduces chaos. The Second Generation would be after that. And then Soul Forge, which I have not read. Brothers in Arms, which I have not read. Dragonlance Adventures. I don't know if that's actually a novel or if that's an actual adventure, but I believe it's a novel. I have not read that one. Atlas of the Dragonlance World and Dragons of War, which I believe I have read that one. So Soul Forge and Brothers in Arms are, well, I know Soul Forge is a prequel story to the original trilogy. I believe Brothers in Arms is as well. So you should probably read most of that to know what on earth is going on in this book. So just a little note on that. But if you truly wanted to, you could probably pick up the last book in this book, as long as you had like a vague knowledge of Dragonlance, and you could probably run with it. The story is told well enough that it fills in most of the blanks, because they very wisely have characters who were not around for other events, so the main characters have reason to talk about those events, so it seems natural. For those of you who don't know about writing and whatnot, that is far superior to where you have a scene of two characters who experienced an event and then just randomly talk about it as if one of them did not. That's not how you want to do those kind of things. And Weiss and Hickman definitely are masters of their craft. So, Bob says, check it out. And before we go into spoilers, just in case you're going to check out here, we always appreciate likes, shares, subscribes, all that fun stuff. Comments in the comment section. If you've read the book, let me know what you thought of it. If you're going to read the book, let me know what you think. Let me know if this helped influence you to do that. But otherwise, here we go into spoiler territory. So the book picks up basically where the last one left off. Raistlin, Sturm, Tasselhoff, and Destina have all been thrown back in time to the Third Dragon War, where Huma Dragonbane is destined to fight and kill Takhisis with one of the Dragonlances. Well, kill, it sends her back to the Abyss. And he's going to do so on the back of a silver dragon. His companion, Magus, is destined to die being tortured for information. And our characters from our other novels all start interacting with all of them. And this leads to dire consequences at the very end. Because Raistlin, becomes friends with Magus. It's one of his heroes. The staff that Raistlin carries throughout the other books is the staff of Magus. And Sturm, Huma, is one of his heroes because he's a knight of Solamnia and is, like the guy. There's the Song of Huma about how he defeated Takhisis and everything. And so as the book progresses, they keep running into these, well, this thing needs to happen, but it's not happening. And then something else causes it to happen, like the knights finding the Dragonlances, and things like that. And they're at the High Claris's Tower through most of the book, and it's about to be besieged by Takhisis' army. There's her primary army, but there's also the army that's right there being led by a red dragon and who can shapeshift into human form. So he ends up attacking the tower prematurely from what they know of history because he finds out that Destina has the Grey Gem, which contains chaos. And so he wants the Grey Gem because he thinks it'll make him powerful enough to overthrow Takhisis and become a god. But he still ends up losing in a similar manner, still ends up wounded, still ends up leaving. And it's not until the very end of the book that time just goes wildly off course. You think everything's going to work out, but he had sent a guy in to steal the Grey Gem, and he gave him a sword that could kill a dragon. And he uses it and kills the silver dragon that Huma is supposed to ride into battle. And then he kills Huma. So history gets completely undone right there. And then they all get sucked forward in time. And that's possible because the two wizards I mentioned, Dalamar and, again, I think it's Justinius, they're not able to repair the device of time journeying, but they find someone who can make a new one. And she's like the descendant of the guy who made the original. So she makes a new one with the parts, but she has to like melt them down and reforge them. And she makes a new rhyme, which is significantly easier than the other one. And there's not a whole bunch of moving parts like the other one. She's an interesting character in that like she has magic talent, but she could never hope to pass the test to go on to become a real wizard. And the price of failure is death. So, but she can make machines, and she knows how to, like, the spells just come to her as far as like to animate them. And she mentions that as far as the device of time journeying, that she'll know the spells and she'll be able to cast them. But like trying to get her to cast a fireball, nothing, can't happen. So interesting predicament she's in. But yeah, you have that. You get a lot of Huma and Magus and the Silver Dragon, who I want to say was Gwyneth, and some of the other people that are alive back there in the time. And then in the present, you have the monk from the past book, the last book, who is trying to figure out what they can do, and he ends up going back to try to get them to leave to come forward in time. But he's told that he has to get all of them. Tasselhoff winds up on some side quest with a bunch of gnomes in a giant machine that they have dubbed the Dragonlance. So he thinks that maybe this is the Dragonlance, but it doesn't look like the one he knows. So yeah, all ultimately finally collapses on them, and they wind up back where they left, which was supposed to be the gathering they were going to have at the end of the last tome. Except now the inn and the whole village is occupied by Draconians, which was not the case. Kitiara is the only one of them there, whereas in the real course of events, she was the one who didn't show up. And Gold Moon and can't think of the other person's name. I should know this. They're very important to the original trilogy. They are there in disguise, and the other characters quickly figure out what's going on because Raistlin found himself with Caramon and just kind of feigned ignorance, and Caramon, being the guy that he is, told him everything. That they're both in the Blue Dragon Army, and Takhisis won the war 1,000 years ago. So now it's time to try to figure out how to fix everything. That's basically where the book leaves off, with Raistlin telling the monk to go forward to his time to tell Austinus, I believe, and the other two wizards, like, hey guys, like, things have gone totally sideways. We are going to have to do something radical to fix all this, and we don't know what it is yet. So we'll find out what that is in the third book. That's where things leave off. Quite the cliffhanger. So, yeah, again, good book. Definitely worth checking out. Well written, exciting. Characters all seem to be in character from what I recall from the other books. So yeah, definitely worth checking out. Hopefully you enjoyed this review. Let me know in the comments again. It's again, here's where at the end, like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. But otherwise, well, I don't know. I don't have some witty send off about Dragonlance here. What a loss. Something Kryn. don't let yourself get sucked into a time travel adventure. Like that's generally a bad thing, all things considered. So yeah, just don't do that. Stay here. Comment on YouTube. Catch you guys later.